in our beings, obedience to the laws of health is to be made a matter of personal duty. We ourselves must suffer the results of violated law. We can't say, well, it's okay this time, or it doesn't matter, because we must individually answer to God for our habits and practices. Therefore, the question with us is not what is everybody else doing, but how shall I as an individual treat this habitation that God has given me? Let's see. So when God created Adam and Eve, where did he take them from? How did he create man? From the ground. The Bible says he took from the dust of the ground and formed Adam, breathed into his mouth, and he became a living soul. And then how did he create Eve? From the rib. He put Adam to sleep, and he took a rib, and he created a woman. So, did you know that Adam and Eve came forth from the hand of their Creator in the perfection of every physical, mental, and spiritual endowment? Every part of our being was perfect at the beginning. And as Eric pointed out, every person that has lived since Adam has the code that God put into our bodies. And then God planted a garden. How many of you have gardens? Good. More of you need. God planted a garden and surrounded them with everything that was lovely and attractive to the eye, which their physical necessities required. And we find in Genesis, the end of chapter 1, beginning of chapter 2, the original diet was the fruits, grains, nuts, and vegetables. That was it. They didn't need anything else, and we don't either. It's exciting to me to see people come in and change their way of providing nutrition for themselves, and they come to a more plant-based diet. A lot of their ailments go away. Isn't that amazing? Okay. So I have this little chart here that shows the length of life that people had from Adam to Noah. The Bible tells us that the person who lived the longest was Methuselah, and he lived 969 years. And his name means and I think until the flood comes, if I remember correctly. Anyway, the point is, all of these people, Adam, Seth, Enoch, Canaan, Jared, Methuselah, and Noah, lived over 900 years, and they were all following the plant-based diet, the original diet that God had given them. I don't know what happened to Lamech. He was 200 years younger, but he still lived a very long time. And then we see, after the flood, remember, the earth was destroyed. There was no plants left. And they took, the angel led the animals 2 by 2, and the ones that were clean animals by 7s. So they had an animal to sacrifice, and they had animals to eat. And at that point, God gave them permission to eat flesh until the plants grew again. He never intended for them to eat it forever. And we can see that the longevity decreases rapidly after Noah until the time of Christ is way down in the bottom corner there. The average lifespan at the time of Christ was 45 years. That's a big difference from 950 to 45. Well, that was several thousand years, but it's still a big jump. The average lifespan today in third world countries is 45 years old. I remember when I was in Kenya in 1995, I was 45 years old, and it was my responsibility to interview the patients as they came to our clinic and find out what their symptoms or problems were so the doctor could decide what he was going to do. And I was visiting with some of them with a translator while we were waiting. And I told them my age, and they just about literally fell off their chair. So, you can't have a son that's 20 years old. I said, yes, I can. Yes, I am that age. And they couldn't believe it because over there, at least at that time, the women do the heavy work, build the house and tend the garden and bear the children and carry the firewood and whatever. And they carry their heavy loads on their head and neck and shoulders, so they have a lot of breakdown of the muscles and the joints. And they just wear out. So 45 was really old to them. Here I am 30 years later, and it's like, anyway. So the point is, when we move away from a plant-based diet, we cut our lives short. So we just need to be aware of that. So let's see. So whatever we eat or drink or whatever we do, we need to do all of it for the glory of God. And then in Psalms, we're told, Psalm 103, verses 2-5, we need to bless the Lord and forget not all his benefits. How many of you go through your day thanking the Lord for all his benefits? And ask him, remember that he forgives all our iniquities. He heals all of our diseases, all of them. He redeems your life from destruction, and he crowns you with loving kindness and tender mercies. And he satisfies your mouth with good things, so that your youth is renewed like the eagle. We might not see our gray hair go away, but our cells can regenerate and our bodies can recover from many different things if we just change our lifestyle habits. I'm sharing these things with you. Did I go too? I'm sharing these things with you as a preface to what I'm going to take you on a trip through the digestive system this afternoon. We also remember that the sacred temple of the body must be kept pure and uncontaminated, that God's Holy Spirit can dwell therein. He can't abide in the same place that has unclean food or unhealthy food or poisons and toxins. Sometimes we think we're eating well, but that last slide that Eric showed us with all the excitotoxins, we aren't even aware. So the point of that, in my opinion, is that we just need to leave, as much as we can, leave the processed and packaged foods alone. They're so easy. They taste good and they make us want more. Even things like a can of tomato soup or spaghetti sauce has sugar in it. Did you know that the chemical structure of sugar is just one molecule different than cocaine? That's why they put it in things. It's addictive and it makes us want to buy more. So we have to consecrate all of our being, our mind and body and spirit. Remember one of the first slides I showed you is that God made Adam and Eve perfect in every one of those areas. By properly using our powers to their fullest extent in the most useful employment, by keeping every organ in health, by so preserving every organ that mind, sinew, and muscle shall work harmoniously, we may do the most precious service for God. When we do all we can on our part, then we can expect the blessed results to follow. And we can ask God in faith to bless our efforts for the preservation of health. Where are we here? I don't want to spend a lot of time, reading to you because I have graphics to show you. Whoops, what happened here? Sorry, just a moment. Okay. Okay. In this statement here, it says, in the matter of diet, you must reason from cause to effect. If I eat this, what's going to happen? I didn't know a lot of the things I know now when I was in my 30s, and I had a gallbladder problem, and so I'll tell you more about that, but I have to be careful not to eat too much fat. If I eat too much fat in my diet, then where I had that surgery hurts, and I don't like that pain. So I have to choose to eat it because it tastes good and suffer the pain later, or avoid it because I don't want that pain. So that's just an illustration of what it's talking about here. It's far better to prevent disease than to know how to treat it. It is the duty of every person, for his own sake and for the sake of others, all humanity, to inform himself in regard to the laws of life and conscientiously to obey them. We can't, from this day forward, none of us in this room can slide through every day thinking everything's going to be okay. We have to make a conscious effort with everything that we prepare, everything that we choose to put in our mouths or watch or wear, it's all-encompassing. So because we need to become acquainted with that most wonderful of all organisms, this body that God has made for us, we need to understand the functions of the various organs, and that's why I do this lecture. Because I'll just interject right here. Over the years, I've had people tell me different things that make me know they don't know about their body. They don't know. I had one young man come to me because he was having colon problems, and I was trying to educate him. You have to chew your food really well before you swallow it. And he goes, really? He said, I thought I could just chomp, chomp, swallow, and I have teeth in my stomach that can help, that can finish. And he was serious. He was like in his middle 20s. He really thought that's what would happen. Well, we're going to find out that's not true. I've had several people tell me they don't know the difference between the gallbladder and the urinary bladder. There's a big difference, not only in location, but in function. So that's just two examples of how we need to understand that our body works. And we also should study the influence of the mind on the body and the body on the mind. So what you think affects how your digestive system functions. Have you ever tried to eat a meal when you're really stressed or you're really upset about something? The food doesn't digest. It just sits there because your mind has control over the whole function of digestion. Since the mind and the soul find expression through the body, both the mental and spiritual vigor are in great degree dependent upon physical strength and activity. Some of you are in an older generation. Do you recognize that as you age, you don't have as much control over how your body functions? It just doesn't work like it used to? That's what? You align with that, yeah. So even in our senior years, we can improve our physical health. Maybe in smaller ways, but we can still gain strength. And it says here, without health, no one can as distinctly understand or as completely fulfill his obligations to himself, to his fellow beings, or to his Creator. Therefore, the health should be as faithfully guarded as the character. Wow. So we need to understand something about physiology and hygiene, even if we just study it on a 4th grade level. There's a really nice book written by Dr. Kellogg 100 years or more ago, but it's called now I can't remember, This House We Live In. It used to be available at the ABC. I don't know if it still is, but anyway. So let's start looking at this house that we live in and see what we can find. We're going to travel from the mouth to to the exit point. I'm going to share with you not only a brief description of function, but some natural remedies of common ailments along the way. So the mouth consists of incisors, canines, premolars, and molars, and I've put a picture up here to illustrate that the human mouth, you'll notice the surface of all the teeth are flat. The molars are made for grinding, for chewing nuts and lettuce, and different things like to chew. The dogs and the cat families, they have long incisors, and their mouth is designed to tear their prey apart, and they chomp it and swallow. Interestingly, the intestinal tract of the humans is longer than the intestinal tract of the dogs and cat family. And the reason for that is the dog and cat family has stronger digestive juices that break down those flesh meats and other things that they're eating. And so we don't have those strong digestive fluids. Digestion begins in the mouth. If you don't chew your food thoroughly, it's not mixed well with the saliva, then especially the carbohydrates are starting to be digested in the mouth. If you don't chew it well enough and it goes on down the tract, it's never completely digested, and that causes problems. And again, I just want to review for you the original diet that the Creator gave us was fruits, grains, nuts, and vegetables. So one of the common problems in the mouth is canker sores. Has anybody ever had that problem? Or cold sores? Sometimes it's caused by an injury. If you bite your cheek, you get a little sore there. But canker sores are caused by a virus called herpes simplex. And so the goal is to avoid foods that are too hot or too spicy, because that can break that tissue down. One thing that can heal it is eucalyptus oil. Another thing we've found is if you take, when it first starts, a little burning or you feel tingling or something that's starting to break down that and turn into a sore, if you'll take a Q-tip and put it under really hot water and then just roll it over that area, it will kill that virus and it won't develop into a sore that takes weeks to heal. My husband used to get them right over the teeth that when he's talking, it was very painful. Also, aloe vera gel held in the mouth for a few moments will help heal it. And then the other thing is to strengthen the immune system so that you don't succumb to the viruses. I don't mean to die, but just succumb to that pain and that problem. Let's look at the tongue for a moment. This is a picture of a healthy tongue. The tongue should be moist and the edges of it smooth, as opposed to a person that's sick or has digestive problems. Their tongue is coated. Sometimes people sleep with their mouth open and the tongue gets coated like that. But this is a picture of a lady with the flu. And of course, your digestive system's not working well when you're sick. But it can also look like that if you're not drinking enough water. So it's a simple fix. So after we get past the mouth, the next point is the esophagus. The esophagus is a tube that runs from your mouth to your stomach. So it's a muscular tube, and it's supposed to move the food on down. Have you ever had the experience of eating too big of a bite, or the food is too dry, or there's other problems that can happen, but you just can't get it down past right here? You have to drink some water to move it on down. Well, if you would have taken the time to chew that food more thoroughly, it should go down without any problem. There's also, let me give you the next slide. So this is a picture of how the esophagus moves with peristalsis or muscular waves to move that food bolus down into the stomach. Let's see. So one of the problems that we have with the esophagus is the hiatal hernia. The hiatal hernia is just a little pouching out of the esophagus through a weakness in the wall of the stomach where the esophagus goes into the stomach, and so it pops out a little bit. There's two things I know of that you can do that can pull that hernia back down if it's not very large. They used to do surgery to repair that, but they found that the surgical site was too weak and it would just come right back. If you're overweight, if you eat too much too fast, if you've had too many children, all of those things weaken that muscle wall. and the diaphragm is right there. So one thing you can do is take half a glass full of warm water and swallow it, and then stand on a step that's probably not any higher than the one that's down, just a short step, and jump. And the weight of the water in your stomach will pull, with gravity, will pull that down. I know it sounds simple and somebody's laughing, but you just want to be careful. We don't want people to fall and break a bone. And sometimes it's painful, and I've found that the charcoal in the water will help with that inflammation that makes it painful. Jump on the trampoline? Well, you could, but you just need to jump once. Just that hard jump, and the gravity and the force of the jump will pull it down. I don't think jumping on the trampoline would make it go back up if you're up and down. But another common problem with the esophagus is GERD, or gastric esophageal reflux disease. It's not a disease. What I've learned is that it's actually a symptom of not producing enough hydrochloric acid in the stomach. And so it reflux makes the food come back with a little gas or a burning sensation. Aloe vera gel will calm that down. Drinking more water will calm it down. Chewing your food thoroughly will help with it. It's not the little purple pill that corrects it. We have to remember, I'm not saying that we should never ever take medication, because sometimes people need it for a short term or for life-saving problems, but usually the medication changes the location of the problem. It doesn't correct the underlying cause. So in the work that I do, we need, and I'm trying to be educating you as well, we need to learn what is the cause, what is the effect. If we do this, what happens? Cause and effect. So if we can understand the cause, then we can figure out the remedy. God has a remedy for everything. Everything we eat has to be broken down so that it can be absorbed into the cells. So the next portion of the digestive system that we're going to look at is the stomach. I already told you that the digestion of starch begins in the mouth. Does anybody know what happens in the stomach? You can speak up. I can't hear you. Some ears. Can you speak loudly so everyone can hear you? I know you don't have a microphone, but...
I think you said what happens to the starch.
Then the starch begins in the mouth. What happens in the stomach? Sugar? No. Mm-mm. Proteins, yeah. The digestion of proteins begins in the stomach. In the stomach is the enzyme called pepsin. I didn't change the slide, sorry. And the pepsin also can kill some of the harmful bacteria that's in the stomach. And then digestion is completed in the small intestine. One of the things, well, I guess let me just wait till I get there. The small intestine absorbs those molecules of foodstuffs into the bloodstream, and then the large intestine absorbs the water and compacts the waste and moves it on out. How much can your stomach hold? How much volume? Does anybody know? The volume of the human stomach depends on the person, but generally most stomachs can hold 1 quart. That's 4 cups. But the stomach is so wonderfully made it can expand, and it can hold up to 1 gallon of food. I hope none of you eat that much at one sitting, because that's 4 quarts. The suggestion in this, what I wrote here, is imagine you go to a buffet with an empty milk jug, gallon jug, and you fill that up with all the food you want to eat. Do you think you can sit there and eat that much food at one time? I like to compare the stomach to a washing machine, and maybe the old agitator washing machines. You put your clothes in and you put it just the right amount. The agitator moves the clothes around and they get clean, right? But what if you overfill it? There's more than it can do, and your clothes don't get clean. The same thing happens in our stomach. We don't have an agitator, but the stomach is a muscular pouch, and when we put too much in it, it can't move and mix with the digestive enzymes and move things around so they can be broken down. That's a very simplistic illustration, but I think you get the point. We don't want to abuse our stomachs. A common ailment in the stomach is an ulcer, but before I go there, I want to tell you about the space between meals. The ideal space between meals is 5 hours. It takes 3 to 4 hours, depending on what you've eaten, to digest the food, and then your stomach needs to rest a little bit before you put more food in there. So nothing should be taken between meals, less than 5 hours. Even 1 candy or 1 cookie or 1 chip, and who can eat only 1, will stop that digestion process until that new thing that you just ate comes to the same point of digestion before it can be released on down everything in the stomach has to wait for that new food that you put in there before the 5 hours was up. So if you ate at a certain time and then 3 hours later, my computer's acting up, excuse me. If you eat at a certain time and then 3 hours later you have, for example, a sandwich or a yogurt or a bowl of pudding or something, everything stops that you ate at, say, at 10 o'clock and then at 8 o'clock, and then at 10 o'clock you had a snack, until the new food that you put in comes to the same point of digestion. So inside our bodies, our temperature is higher than we take in our mouth. So you've got like 99 to 100 degrees, and that food is just sitting there. What do you think happens? I can't hear you enough to know what you're saying, but you're... Fermentation, thank you. Fermentation is the production of an alcohol. Did you know that you can never have touched an alcoholic drink, but you can be legally drunk? The combination, this is a side note, but the combination of milk and sugar or milk and eggs and sugar What's our favorite thing that has those ingredients as America? Ice cream, custard puddings. There's probably a longer list, but those two examples are pretty common. And milk and sugar. When I was a child, we had a sugar bowl on our table, and we put sugar on our cold cereal or sugar on our oatmeal or whatever, and then we put cow's milk on it. Well, we didn't know it at the time, but I've learned that that creates alcohol. There was a study done with a group of student nurses years and years ago, and they were given they were subjected to a lab test as they drew blood and checked their blood alcohol level, which was normal. And then they were allowed to eat all of the homemade ice cream they wanted, which is milk and eggs and sugar, the old recipe, you know. And they had blood alcohol levels that were higher than legally drunk. That was pretty amazing when I learned that. So even the non-dairy ice creams, they put them in smaller packages, so you want to eat the whole package at one time, like a pint or less. And I haven't found any studies that prove this, but I know they're full of sugar. I don't know about the dairy milk, and so I don't know if that combination still produces alcohol, but sugar weakens our immune system, and so we just need to be aware of that. The other thing that we need to understand is that if you choose to eat a third meal, which is kind of hard if you're spacing them 5 hours apart, but if you choose to eat that third meal, it should be at least 3 hours before you go to bed. And the reason for that is your stomach needs to be mostly empty and that process mostly well advanced, because your stomach needs to rest. Have you ever eaten late at night and then the next morning you're so tired and you're not really hungry for breakfast? It's because your stomach's been working all night. I really liked this scenario here. The hours from 12 to 4 are God's time to discard dead cells and bring in new healthy cells. So if we are keeping those organs working, they can't regenerate as well as if we let them rest. And then from 4 to 6 a.m., the endocrine system prepares you for the day's stress. So we have to be mindful of what we're putting, the time we're putting things in our mouth, as well as the process. So now we're going to move out of the stomach. And the first place that, when the food leaves the stomach, the first place that it goes is in the first section of the small intestine, is called the duodenum. The duodenum passes right by the gallbladder, as you can see on the diagram there. And the job of the gallbladder is to store the bile, which digests the fats. And then when the food passes into the duodenum, and it passes by that common bile duct, the gallbladder gets a signal, and so it squeezes some bile to digest the fat. Well, let's back up in our minds to the stomach for just a moment. If you've eaten a food, can anybody think of a food that's high protein, but it's also fat? Nobody can think of it. How about cheese? I heard that. Okay, good. Cheese is a perfect example. So is peanut butter. You put peanut butter on your bread, the starch enzymes can't get to the bread because it's covered with fat and protein. But let's just think about cheese. You have a protein and it's covered by a fat. It goes into the stomach, and the stomach enzymes, the pepsin and other enzymes, can't get to the protein because it's covered by a fat. The fat doesn't get broken down till it goes by the gallbladder. We have statements in the book Counsels on Diet and Foods, Ministry of Healing, and probably Counsels on Health, that cheese is unfit for for consumption. It should never enter our mouths. And I thought, Lord, I don't understand. I like cheese and I don't want to give it up. And that's how he helped me understand that it's not digestible. It's constipating. So, go ahead, ask. It gets broken down some, but remember I said a protein covered by a fat. Cheese is the protein from the milk. So they take the liquid away, and the protein that's left is the curds that they develop into after it ferments for a while. So it's just never completely broken down, because when it gets there and the fat breaks down, then you still have the undigested proteins. So I'll finish answering the question in just a minute, okay? Let's talk about the gallbladder for just a minute. Do you know that the majority of Americans have gallstones? They just haven't let their presence be known. You don't want them to be known. It's very painful. We make stones up in the liver. The most common cause of gallstones is dehydration. So most of us need at least 2 quarts of water a day. Some of us need more than that. I'll just throw out real quick here. You take your weight, divide it in half. That's the number of ounces that you need. If you're overweight, as you lose weight, you don't have to drink as much. So, and we need to drink up to a half an hour before we eat, and then wait for an hour after we eat, just because we don't want to mix a lot of fluids with our solid food, because then again we dilute the enzymes and hinder the process of digestion. Also, the pancreas ejects some digestive enzymes into the duodenal area and into the small intestine there. And the other one that probably most of you know is the islets of Langerhans, is the place in the pancreas that produces the insulin. So it's all related. And then we can talk about the liver for just a moment. There's a large percentage of American people have a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And that is a disease. That's when the liver has worked so hard getting rid of the toxins and the stress, and it has to filter everything that we take in that goes into the blood, and it goes through the liver. These are some of the things that affect the working of the liver. We talked about alcohol and fermentation. I forgot to tell you about, in the stomach, we need to eat vegetables at one meal and fruit at another. And you can have grains with either one. But if you eat vegetables and fruit at the same meal, the fruit digests quickly, but the vegetables take longer. So if they're both in there at the same time, the fruit can ferment. Most fruit is high in sugar, and it has to wait till the vegetables are to the same point of digestion. So we need to be careful about the combinations as well. I'm not trying to overwhelm you with too much information, but just if you could just take some things home and start there, then you can add these things later. Anger and sadness hinders the working of the liver. If we fill our stomach too full, it puts a burden on the liver. If we sit too much, we don't get up and move around. If we're constipated, that we should be at least equal to the number of meals we're eating. We should move our bowels every day. Stress can cause fatty liver disease. And the use of drugs, either prescription drugs or street drugs, cause damage to the liver. And then there's disease of the liver as well. The liver helps break down the fats. Oops, let me get to the next one here. It converts glucose to glycogen and stores it there until the body says, I need some more energy here, give me some. It's one of the main sources of urea, which is a substance in the urine, and so it works in cooperation with the kidneys. The liver also stores vitamins and minerals till they're needed. and the liver is responsible for producing cholesterol. Now, one of the common things that the medical doctors tell us is that you don't want to have too high a cholesterol. If you're at 200, that's the limit. You can't be over that. We used to, 50 years ago, we used to say that it's not healthy to have a low cholesterol below 200. One of my Adventist natural doctor friends tells his patients it's okay to have your cholesterol a little over 200 if you're eating a plant-based diet. Let me just say that the nutritional source of cholesterol is all the animal products. So if you have high cholesterol, that's the first place to start. But the other factors are stress and lack of exercise, not drinking enough water. So we have to look at all of those factors as well and correct them if we can. And then I found this statement. I wasn't looking for it. It jumped off the page at me. Sadness deadens the circulation in the blood vessels and nerves and retards the action of liver. Today we would say that's depression and grief. And we could probably also add unforgiveness and bitterness, because those emotions weaken the immune system. Sadness or depression hinders the process of digestion and nutrition and has a tendency to dry up the marrow of the whole system. Do you remember reading in Proverbs, it says, a merry heart does good like a medicine, but a broken spirit dries up the bones. Well, the marrow is the center of the bones, and that's where the red blood cells are made, and maybe some white blood cells, and so it's an important part of our body that we don't pay much attention to. But our emotions have a lot to do with the function of our organs. Just a moment here. So the next section I'm going to talk about is the small intestine. I've got it. My mouse is not cooperating with me. So from the duodenum is the first part of the small intestine, and then we go on down the line. I don't understand what's going on here. Let's see if I can do it. Okay, so inside, this is to answer your question, ma'am, right there. Good, I'm glad you didn't fall asleep. I know it's right after lunch. So the small intestine, this is a drawing. It's not an actual picture. The small intestine has little finger-like projections on the wall. And if you can see this picture well enough, the wall of the villi, that finger-like projection, is only 1 cell thick. And there's blood vessels, and there's, see, I can't read it, it's too small. Anyway, the absorption of the molecular or the broken down food particles is absorbed there through that villi. So that's an important, there we go. That's an important function, and what we find happening commonly nowadays is called leaky gut. Anybody heard of that? So leaky gut is the small intestine has the villi, and then the cells between are supposed to be really tight, like you can't even see light through them. But because of too large of food molecules or inflammation or food intolerance, toxins, different drugs, sometimes bacteria gets in there, it causes a separation in that junction where they're supposed to be tight. And so the molecules that are too large, that haven't broken down well enough, get in between and go out into the circulation, cause food intolerance or allergies, immune system issues, and a lot of different autoimmune diseases. I think they're finding that that's one of the causes of Alzheimer's or dementia is the leaky gut, and they're finding that diabetes, as it's corrected, and the leaky gut is corrected. So I see puzzled faces. Maybe some of you are wondering, well, I think I've been told, or I think I have leaky gut. What do I do about it? There's two things you can do. The aloe vera gel will heal the lining of the intestines and the stomach. And you can take it. If you take too much aloe vera, you'll have loose stools, so you can adjust the amount you're taking. And the second thing is hydrochloric acid. And again, what I was taught is that you start with betaine hydrochloride is made with beets, so it's a plant-based source. So you take 1 capsule the first meal, the second meal 2 capsules, the third meal 3 capsules, and you continue that, adding 1 capsule per meal until you reach a point where you feel like you've got GERD. You've got that burning sensation in your esophagus. It's not burning, it's not damaging any tissue. So then the next meal you back down 1, and that's your level of hydrochloric acid. Because the leaky gut, another cause for leaky gut is not enough hydrochloric acid in the stomach. So it can't break down the food like it needs to. And so I had that problem, was diagnosed with that problem. And I had to work up to 7 or 8 capsules before I found that level. So you can't take too much of it. It's an individualized dose, and and then you stay at that level until you find that burning again because you've healed up some, and then you keep bringing it down 1 capsule till you only need 1 or 2 capsules at a meal. Leaky gut affects the whole body. If you have frequent colds and food sensitivities, if you are so tired all the time, if you have arthritis, fibromyalgia, or headaches that can be caused by leaky gut, depression, anxiety, attention deficit disorder are all affected by our digestive system. The skin can be affected and is exhibited by psoriasis, eczema, acne, and rosacea. The thyroid can be affected by leaky gut. And then the colon, constipation, diarrhea, irritable bowel, Crohn's. Those are all affected or caused by leaky gut. It's pretty simple to correct, along with correcting what you're eating and the timing between meals and all of that. You know, as you're seeing, everything works together. I need to back up here just a minute. Let me go. Okay. The small intestine is an average of 23 feet. Can you imagine? The small intestine is all curled up in the middle. There's 23 feet of it packed in there. And then we're going to move to the large intestine, and we find that the large intestine takes up about 30 feet. It takes about 32 hours to finish the digestive process. So remember, the small intestine's job is to continue to break down the food molecules into smaller particles and then absorb them into the system and carry them out to the cells where we get the energy and the calories that we need from those foods. The large intestine absorbs the vitamins created by the good bacteria in our colon and absorbs the water and compacts the waste materials to be eliminated. The first 5 feet of the large intestine is called the bowel or the colon, and the last 6 inches, the rectum and the anal canal. The anal canal ends at the anus or the rectum, where it eliminates the stool or the feces, the large waste. One of the most common problems there is the Hemorrhoids. You can have hemorrhoids from sitting too much, from tight waists on your skirts or your pants, or your, the men wear pants. You can have hemorrhoids from pregnancy, the weight of the child against the vessels in the lower colon cause them to enlarge. Anything that compromises the circulation in the lower part of the colon can, because that's what a hemorrhoid is a varicose vein in the rectal area. I think this is the most fun part of my lecture, and before you get too upset with me for saying that, the most effective remedy that I know of for hemorrhoids is a potato. So you take a stick of a potato the size of your little finger and insert that like a suppository into your rectum. It will shrink the swelling of the hemorrhoid and it will stop the bleeding. It's just amazing. And then the question comes up, well, what happens to it? Where does it go? Well, the next time you have a bowel movement, it will move on out. It won't go back up inside your body. It's really amazing how that works. And it's something simple. We all have potatoes. Most of us have potatoes in our kitchen. Another common ailment is the polyps. And those can become cancerous. They're recommending that if you're over the age of 50, you have colonoscopy to make sure that you don't have polyps, and they'll remove them if you do. Diverticuli are the little pouches in your colon, and diverticulitis is an inflammation of those pockets when food gets trapped in there. And so some people are troubled with they can't eat things like tomatoes because they have such tiny seeds, and strawberries and blackberries, those kind of things. Those little seeds get in those pouches and cause infection and inflammation. And they can also, if they're not attended to, they don't give you any symptoms, so unless they're inflamed. So they can also turn into cancer. Another problem is if we're eating too much meat, or even meat at all. There's no fiber in meat, so because the food stuff moves slower through the digestive system, it stays in contact with that mucosal lining longer and causes irritation. And so that can be a cause of colon cancer. So, constipation. We're going to look at this. Remember I said our meals should be 5 hours apart. This is a picture, a graphic picture of a person on the standard American diet is low fiber. The ketone diet, the hamburgers and French fries, the standard American diet. So you can see here there's 3 meals, Saturday meals, Friday meals, there's 3 meals. Thursday meals is backed up clear down to the end of the colon. And Wednesday's dinner is just getting ready to pass out through the elimination channel there. 65 to 100 hours. How many days is that? I didn't figure it out. 3, 4. It's 4 or 5 days. Can you believe and some of you may have had this experience. I do colon therapy, and so I've had people come to me and say, well, I'll ask them, what is your bowel habits? And they say, oh, I'm fine. And I say, you have to define for me what fine means, because I've had people tell me, oh, I only go to the bathroom once a week. Well, that's what this illustrates. Just think about it. If you're eating 3 meals a day over 7 days, that's 21 meals. That's the standard American habits. And you're only moving one of those meals out, what is happening with those other 20 meals? They're sitting there, they're irritating the lining of the colon, and you're reabsorbing the waste that you're supposed to be getting rid of. I've even had people tell me they only go once a month. I just worked, the week before I came here, I just worked with a gal that she was all distended and bloated, and she was worried that she had a tumor. It turned out she doesn't, and she doesn't have a blockage, but she was only able to pass just a little bit of stool for a month. So it does happen, and it's not healthy. And then we're going to look at, this is a person on a high fiber diet, which is a plant-based diet. And you can see there's just 2 meals they used Saturday and Friday, for example. But there's space in between those meals. There's time for the colon to rest, and it's moving well. You should be able to, well, before I say that, so the high fiber diet should have a transit time of 20 to 45 hours, meaning from the time you eat it until you eliminate that waste. So none of us should be doing this. We should, within 20 minutes after you eat a meal, you should get a signal that it's time to go to the bathroom, and you're eliminating what you ate yesterday. You don't want to sit there with a magazine and read the whole book till the spider webs grow. Oh, you didn't see that picture, sorry. I forgot to change it. Just a minute, I'll show you. So I want you to have that picture in your mind. And so the next picture is the Bristol stool chart. I'm not going to apologize for spending so much time on this because it's so important to our health. Type number 4 is what the ideal stool should look like. It should be the size and shape of a banana and 10 to 12 inches long and easily passed. You get that signal, you go sit down and you pass it, you get up and go. The other illustrations here are unhealthy stools. Sometimes people say, well, I have diarrhea. Well, you probably are constipated unless you're sick. You're probably constipated, and the liquid part is coming around the hard, packed part. And so you're eliminating watery or fluffy stool. This next slide is actual, where'd it go? I didn't, Well, maybe I didn't, okay. I have a picture here, but I didn't include it today. It's when we don't eliminate properly, there's a rubbery substance that builds up on the wall of the colon, and I've actually seen some of that come out with time. It feels like the end of your nose. It's kind of rubbery, and it doesn't belong there. We need to move it. And the next slide is a composite. The one on the left is a healthy colon, drawing of a healthy colon. The one on the right is an unhealthy colon. It's a composite picture of actual x-rays that have been taken, and that was taken from a book by, I think, Bernard Jensen. So there's things like spasms in the transverse colon. The colon muscles tighten up and they can't move the stool through there. Of course, there's appendicitis, and there's ballooning, or the colon can stretch and become a megacolon, hold a large amount of stool. And sometimes we have cancer of the colon. So you might be asking, what are sources of fiber? What kind of foods have fiber? Well, all of the plant kingdom has fiber. So the grains, the nuts, the fruits, the vegetables, they all have fiber, and we need to include some of that every day. What about diseases of the whole intestinal, the gastric system? I've told you some of them. In the esophagus, we talked about GERD. there's esophageal cancer in the liver, there's alcoholic liver disease. If we have fermentation that I talked about, or people drink too much alcohol, it kills the liver cells, which hardens the liver and it can't function like it's supposed to. If it gets to be too much cells involved, then we have major problems and major symptoms, and it can lead to death. The liver is a wonderful organ. It can regrow. My neighbor donated a third of her liver to her sister for some reason, and her liver has already grown back in just under 2 years. So the gallbladder, main issues there are the gallstones or cancer of the gallbladder or infection of the gallbladder. Sometimes the gallbladder just stops working and people have to have it removed. The stomach, we have inflammation of the stomach that can be from too many spicy foods. I remember when I was working in the doctor's office as a senior in high school, so I was 18. I prepared this patient to see the doctor. The doctor went in and talked to him for a few minutes, and he came out like this, just shaking his head. I said, "What is wrong?" And he goes, "That guy's been drinking a gallon of vinegar every day for a long time, and his stomach was all inflamed, and he had ulcers, and he was a mess." Well, probably none of us in this room are going to drink a gallon of vinegar a day, but how many of us eat vinegar in our foods? The vinegar hardens the cells in our bodies, and it decreases the B vitamins, and it has something to do with damaging the red blood cells, so it can cause anemia. But we have vinegar in our mayonnaise that we buy in the store, our salad dressings, the olives, the pickled garlic, the pickled whatever is all vinegar. So we need to read the labels and decrease or eliminate the use of vinegar. In the small intestine, there's the duodenal ulcer, celiac disease. They don't have the genetic properties to digest the gluten, so they have to leave it alone. But nowadays we have a high incidence of people that are sensitive to gluten. Some of that may be because of the things that are put on the wheat and when it's grown and the process that they use. You know, back in my grandparents' day and maybe in my childhood, we didn't have that problem. And also they put a lot of preservatives. How long does it take a loaf of bread to mold versus you grind your own grain and make your own bread? It'll mold within 3 or 4 days if you don't refrigerate it. But the store bread, oh my goodness, it can sit there for weeks before it molds because it has mold retardant and other things in it that are probably harmful to us. Irritable bowel is also pretty common. It can be affected by gluten. It can be affected by chemicals in the foods. It can be affected by too much fat in the diet, not enough fiber. And then there's also Crohn's disease, which is an inflammation, a more serious inflammation of the intestines. This is a composite of an unhealthy digestive system. It just shows you what those diseases look like. I thought you might like to see that. I'm not going to dwell on it. Who remembers reading in Exodus chapter 15? Oh, wait a second. Oh, I'm just going to talk about this. I didn't include that slide either. In Exodus chapter 15:26, it says, "If you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord your God and do that which is right in his sight, and will give ear to his commandments and keep all his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon you that I have brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that healeth thee." That's Exodus 15:26, and he's talking to the children of Israel just before they went into the wilderness. It was interesting. My husband and I visited Egypt, Cairo, Egypt, 13 years ago. And we went to the museum where they had the Egyptian mummies on display. Those people didn't look too bad. They were kind of shriveled a little bit, but you could still recognize them as humans because of the way they preserved them. Well, the point I'm making is medical science has taken some of those mummies and put them through CAT scans and other technological ways of finding things. And they found, let me read this list to you, the things they found in those Egyptian mummies. They died of heart disease, they had clogged arteries, they had fat buildup, hardened arteries, stroke, dental disease. They had parasites and tumors and bone disorders and infections. They died between the ages of 20 and 40. They had headaches and stomach ulcers and muscle cramps and arthritis. Is any of those familiar to us today? Well, God's promises are still true and sure, right? He says, I will put none of these diseases upon you if you follow all of my commandments and statutes. So I want to be in that number. I had opportunity to teach some of this in China, and they wanted to know what were those diseases. Brain. A citadel is a fortress protecting a town, sometimes incorporated with a castle. And this comment here says the brain is a citadel, it's a fortress. It protects us if we use it right. Wrong physical habits affect the brain and prevent the attainment of good mental discipline. Study is not the principal cause of breakdown of mental powers. It's not because you've been reading too much or you're concentrating on your studies or your Sabbath school lesson or whatever, reading the Bible too much. That's impossible to read it too much. The main cause of the breakdown of mental powers is improper diet, irregular meals, and a lack of physical exercise, and careless attention in other respects to the laws of health. When I read that, and I read it over before I give you this presentation, I read it again. Every time I do this, I read it again, and I'm just, what if the medical system would pay attention to that and take care of, even families pay attention to that and take care of the people that have dementia? If we just got them on a regular time for their eating and changed what we're feeding them and get them out for a walk every day, their mind would improve. We may not be able to completely see a healing because sometimes it's advanced and the brain cells have gotten holes in them, but anyway, just something to think about. God says when we do all that we can to preserve health, then we can ask God to bless our efforts. So I'm going to draw this to a close now, and I just want to challenge each one of you to take to heart what we've presented, what Eric presented and what I've shown you, that God wants us to be in good health. He wants us to prosper, even as our soul prospers, and our soul can't prosper if we're not in good health. So it's circuitous. It goes around and around. And so take what you can and apply it in your own life. Surrender your heart to Jesus and let him be your physician. He's promised he will, and he wants us to be in good health. There's going to be a question and answer time after the next presentation. So if you have questions, maybe write them down so you don't forget them, or remember them, and I'll try to answer questions. I think it's for all three of us at that time. I've posted my contact information. You're welcome to contact me anytime. Just remember, I may not answer the phone because I'm 3 hours ahead of you, earlier than you are. So I appreciate your attention, and let's close with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we ask that you would bless the information that's been shared today. I just am a servant in your hand, and I just ask that each one of us will be able to take something that we can improve. It's good review for me as well. And I just appreciate you continuing to work with us, to be patient with us, and to guide our steps so that we can rightly represent you in our countenance, in our energy levels, in our desire to serve you and to win others to you, because we know your coming is very soon. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. So I think the next session is going to start as soon as you all can gather downstairs. And there's going to be a presentation on nutrition, and then there'll be a light supper for